what's up, guys? We're going to talk about genetics in this episode, which is going to be amazing because you have a lot of data. This is basically going to be a case study of David that's going to analyze his genetic work, but it also cross-reference it with all of the other tests that he's done. And so basically, my perspective of genetic testing is that, yes, genetic testing is amazing, but it's easy to get lost in all of the weeds and start focusing on all of the wrong stuff. And it's like, okay, I need this, and start supplementing useless stuff which you actually don't need. Because very oftentimes your diet and lifestyle can compensate for that, but not always. So you should always cross-check it with other testing. For example, organic acid test, and I'm still waiting for my whole genome testing, but I've got blood work, organic acid test, stool testing, so I have a whole bunch of stuff that I can compare mine to, which is really great. But this episode is going to be about David, so he's going to analyze everything, because it's easy to say like, this is my genetic test, but when you look at the blood work, it's like, it's actually not an issue. It's like there is no issue, because like my diet is actually compensating for the enhanced requirements of various nutrients, for example. Or so that's my take on genetics. Please go ahead, man.
Yeah, I mean, I found mine to be really interesting, and I think especially because so much of it is pretty accurately cross-referenced against my bloods and my hair mineral as well, or nail mineral in my case. But like so much of it can be cross-referenced. So I think it's actually a really useful starting place for people if they're looking for optimization and don't really know where to start. It's potentially quite a cost-effective way of getting an understanding of areas within your DNA or within your body's bodily function that could do with some support and a little bit of extra help. And lots of the things that show on mine, I've figured out by myself, but it's taken me years, whereas I could have potentially avoided that process by, doing a 50 pound, I think it's probably less than $100 test on something like Ancestry.com. You can run the data through a cheap software. This stuff is kind of, it's amazing that it's available to us, right? So I think it should be considered and be utilized. Like I said, lots of the things on there, if I had done that first, which I couldn't have done because it didn't exist, but if you're stuck now, you could do it now, and then you can potentially avoid years of trial and error to a certain degree, right? So it's like, I always felt good when I supplemented L-carnitine. I didn't really know why, but it was always useful to me. My energy always improved, my libido improved, lots of things improved with L-carnitine. But then you can get lost with that sometimes if you don't know why you're utilizing. Like if you don't understand why you're utilizing it, then maybe it falls out of your supplement routine because you go, hey, I don't need L-carnitine. Like, yeah, I felt better, but like maybe it was not that. Maybe it was something else. Likewise, so I felt fantastic supplementing with TMG, like with betaine anhydrous. And I think I originally started supplementing with TMG because I read the study on like the soccer players that had a 20% increase in testosterone or whatever it was, right? Like, so I was like, cool, I'm going to take TMG to support my testosterone. And so I did it for that. And I felt my energy was way better, like way, way higher. But then it falls out of the supplement routine because you go, oh, I'm going to try something else for testosterone now. But it's like, you have to remember the reason why these supplements are increasing testosterone is because they're doing something behind the scenes to allow it to function properly. And so you then run your genetics, and you see that you have crazy issues with methylation. So within my particular genetics, I have up to 80% reduction methylation. And then that has a knock-on effect on other things. So the knock-on effect of the methylation even showed in my hair mineral analysis. So within my DNA study, we'll go through all of this shortly, but within my genetic study, or genetic data, it showed issues with methylation and excreting or reducing arsenic levels. And that's a specific methylation problem within there, right? All my other heavy metals were fine on the hair mineral analysis, but my arsenic was exceedingly high. So that's where you can put two things together and go, okay, so my arsenic is high because my methylation is poor. Like one of the reasons, right? So if you only had one of those pieces of information, that it wouldn't be helpful. Because if I go, I have high arsenic, and so I go, right, how do I lower arsenic? And I just go for like chelate, I go to try and chelate it with binders, or if I try and just take things that support reductions in heavy metal, so cilantro or garlic or some of these things that help support, it might help to a degree. But if the reason that it's elevated is because of methylation, then it's not going to really help as much as improving methylation will by adding methyl donors, so TMG or SAMI, right? So this is where it becomes, I'm super excited by this. I've been messaging Hans like non-stop for like 3 days, being like, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool. And so, yeah, I'm pretty excited by this because it also shows like weaknesses in the links of things related to my lipids and things like that, which, again, when I've supplemented with certain things, it's shown to have big improvements in my lipids. So one of the genetic variations shows that I struggle to manufacture phosphatidylcholine. Really interesting, right? So what's phosphatidylcholine useful for? Creating bile and supporting, like all the membranes, so mitochondrial membranes, and also, if you have low levels of phosphatidylcholine, you're going to have poor creation of bile because you need certain things for bile production. You need taurine, glycine, phosphatidylcholine, bicarbonate. You need these things for bile production. So you go, right, I've actually, recently I've been doing it with lecithin because I've been doing this bile thing, and as part, and obviously lecithin's going to help with my phosphatidylcholine, but by including the phosphatidylcholine or lecithin, my cholesterol, it just steadily, boom, 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 drops down, right? Like day after day, day after day, day after day, continuous reduction. And so there's some really interesting things in there, likewise with histamine and so on and so forth. So I think probably what we should do is just show people how, what this looks like and how to access it and how to interpret it. So I've been sitting on this genetic data for like 3 years, like 2 to 3 years, right? And I did it originally, because I wanted this information, but there was nowhere that you could easily get it interpreted. And I even paid to have a review with a doctor, which was useful, but it only pulled like a couple of these things, right? It pulled maybe 1 in 10 of these things, and the rest of it didn't uncover for me. And the things that it didn't uncover are actually, for me, more interesting than the things that it did uncover. Because, although methylation was one of the things that it did uncover, but to the degree in which methylation was a problem, it did not uncover, because there's kind of variations within that. And so I think, like I said, I've been sat on this information for a few years because I just didn't know what to do with it. You get the report and it spits out all this information, and it's like looking at the Matrix. It's just numbers and letters, right? It's code, and so then you need a way of running that, and you can't run this in ChatGPT. It can't handle it. It won't do it. You can't put it into Google. It doesn't really work. If you know which individual SNPs to look for, then you can put it into Google, and it might have some information, but not to this degree. So yeah, I don't know if you could share screens. Let me try to do it on my end.
Yeah, I wanted to mention while you're trying to figure that out, when you focus on the right thing, you see results extremely quickly. Like in a couple of days, you mentioned like your cholesterol just like tanked, like in a good way. Like a couple of things just like massively improve.
Yeah, and because if you think about lots of these things that. Some things obviously are going to take time to see bigger changes. So, for example, I don't expect to clear my arsenic in a day, right? I don't think that's going to be the case. But if you know that it's there and you know the problems that it can be causing, then you can actually work on the problems directly and then still be clearing it in the background, right? So I think we've always talked about this, and you know, this is something that I think that you've really emphasized to me, which has been amazing, Hans, is that you have to think about the root cause, but just because there's a root cause doesn't mean you can't fix it further upstream in the meantime, right? And I think this is what I went down this whole route a while ago, and I was like, you got to, you know, just fix the root cause, just fix the root cause. And it's like, fixing the root cause might take 6 months, and you can plug the gap during that 6 months so you get the same outcome, you know, so why wouldn't you, right? So I'll explain that a little bit more as we go as well, about how some of these things have a potentially, like, this is some of it's theory, but how the theory plays out, and how then you can plug gaps and actually feel different within short periods of time and see results in short periods of time. So, you know, for example, with the lipids, like, if you have poor bile flow, then it means your liver is going to be holding cholesterol. It's going to be holding much more of it. If you're holding more cholesterol, then it's going to be leaking into into your blood. You're going to have higher serum cholesterol. So if you can clear if you can accelerate bile flow quickly, then you can very rapidly decrease your cholesterol levels, right? So, you know, cholesterol is something that can chop and change pretty quickly, because you can your body's forever producing it all day, every day. And so therefore it's not like cholesterol, it doesn't have a long half-life in that sense, right? It's not like the cholesterol you eat today, or the cholesterol you produce today, is a different cholesterol to next week, right? Like, it's a short half-life, and it's a constant process. Every day it's being produced, every day it's being utilized or excreted, right? Every day. And so you can quite quickly change that, I think. And well, I've experienced it, you know. So with a couple of supplementations based, I mean, this was slightly before I got the DNA interpretation here, but when you pair it up and you look at it, you go, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. So, you know, my cholesterol at the start of the week was like, total was over 300, and then 7 days later was like 210, right? So that's massive, yeah. And then for the last 4 days, it's just been like 200, 220, 210, and it's been sitting there nicely, right? And that was and you know, this is me being somebody where my total cholesterol, if I don't do anything, will be over 400, right? If I leave it alone, it'll be over 400. So it's really interesting to see how that can affect it. But like, if we go into it just briefly here, so you'll see, you can see the screen, okay, Hans? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So right, so this is a particular software that I was recommended by one of Hans' guys, and it's the first one I looked at, but it seems to just do an amazing job. What you do is you take your data from like Ancestry.com or 23andMe or whichever DNA product that you purchase, and like I say, I'm gonna, you know, the Ancestry.com one is like 50 pounds at the moment, which I just think is, to get this information for 50 pounds is unbelievable. But anyway, so, you know, up to 70% decrease in MTHFR enzymes. So, and this is folate, you know, so this is folate specific as well, right? So one of the other things I should say within my supplement stack has been high dose methylfolate, or not high dose, but like, you know, a good whack of methylfolate, because again, that's supporting.
Before you go on, I'm not sure I'm seeing the right page. I'm seeing like the dashboard with the different options.
Fine. Let me see if I can swap. Let me 1 second. Here we go. I had the wrong page open. That should be the right one now. Yeah, there we go.
All right, yeah, now I can see.
So you see 40 to 70% reduction in MTHFR, folate metabolism, and then also, you know, like my methylation is stacked. Like it's not one, it's like multiple. So it's B12, it's B1. It's every single one of them, right? So, yeah. You know, so I have to I have to hammer B. Like I really have to hammer B vitamins. Like you'd expect somebody to have one of these, right? Like it would not be unusual to have one of these, but to have it for, you know, like for multiple ones of these is, you know, is obviously is quite a lot, right? So these ones here are linked up. This one's a different. This is a completely different one here. So slightly decreased B6. So obviously I'm, you know, supplement with P5P. So that's just an example there of some of the methylation side of things, yeah? So you can support it with methyl donors, and you can also support it with methylate, or like B vitamins or methylated B vitamins. And then that's going to help with anything that requires methyl donors or methylation. This is an interesting one here as well. So riboflavin may help lower homocysteine. So this is suggesting that I'll have higher levels of homocysteine as well. Homocysteine's like correlated with SHBG, for example. So it's like, hey, you know, that there is some correlate. You know, there's an avenue to look at because of elevated SHBG, for example. But supplementing.
Before you go on, like, have you tested your homocysteine before?
No, I haven't. I've never tested homocysteine. So that, you know, so now it gives me reason to go down different avenues. I think the thing with testing is there's an unlimited amount of things you can test for. So you have to know why you sort of have to know why you're testing stuff, right? Or you have to have an idea of what you're expecting from that test. And, you know, homocysteine symptoms, I don't know, like I don't think it's something I've ever thought that, you know, I've never considered homocysteine being a major issue, right? So, but now it gives me reason to test.
So the thing is, like, usually I would always have people test their homocysteine, especially if they have some form of a vascular issue, for example, erectile dysfunction, hypertension, or a risk of cardiovascular disease, given that homocysteine of itself can be inflammatory to the vasculature. So that is, in a way, a relatively easy-ish way to check your methylation. Obviously not perfect. You still want to do, like, there's a Genova test, I think, specifically for methylation that looks at all of the different enzymes involved in methylation, which can also be helpful. So this is why I was basically asking. But like, if you don't have the symptoms, that's interesting because you could maybe actually have elevated homocysteine despite not having like any of the symptoms, though.
Yeah, and you know, for something it could be marginally elevated, and you're not going to necessarily feel it. And also, within all of this, just because one thing is elevated doesn't mean that something else isn't compensating for it, so that you're not noticing it as well. So, like, you know, lots of these things are like you might have one gene variation that elevates something and one gene variation that lowers something, and they probably cancel each other out, right? Like the body is a pretty amazing thing, and it will lean on you know, different things as well. But like, for example, I've always supplemented with B vitamins for you know, or not always, but like I think B vitamins have been a fairly staple supplement for me for 15 years. So I may have been getting away with it, right? That's the thing, isn't it? Like, you know, I think B vitamins have been something, but the trouble is with B vitamins, for example, is, you know, 10 years ago, the B vitamins I was taking would have been like being a folic acid. You know, that's what it would have included, right? And so if it's a folic acid, then you're actually not supporting folate metabolism, and you're also potentially reducing B12 as well, right? So, or not necessarily reducing B12, but you're not revealing a deficiency in B12. So folic acid can hide deficiencies in B12, and also it will show that you have good folic acid. I mean, the crazy thing is on blood tests is it actually says folic acid, and folic acid is a man-made version of folate, and so it should not say folic acid, because that does, you know, there is no, you know, it is folate that we're looking at, right? So riboflavin B6, for example, vitamin C. So here, you know, here's an example. So I have higher plasma vitamin C levels, right? So maybe the higher vitamin C levels are supporting the, you know, the issues with the vascular issues that homocysteine are causing the problems with, because, you know, vitamin C is a useful tool for improving vascular function, right? So this is where you know, you can have one thing and another that can even each other out a little bit, right? Some zinc issues. So this was a really interesting one here as well. So increased relative risk of bladder cancer with arsenic exposure, possibly due to impaired zinc transport to cells. So I know that I have high arsenic levels, right? Because I did a hair mineral test for that, and so my arsenic levels were like way above range. So now I know that I'm at higher risk of bladder cancer because of that. So it's probably sensible to focus a reasonable amount of attention on bringing arsenic down, potentially retesting with another hair mineral test. And then you go on. Yeah.
Have you ever supplemented with zinc
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
in the past? And like, did you notice benefits from it?
Yeah, zinc for me is definitely so. Yeah, I mean, so what I should have said at the beginning is if these are orange, then it means you've got both. You've got both of these. If they're yellow, then it means you've just got one. You're carrying it. So if you got this, then then it means you have that. Whereas if you have it like this, it means you've got what you're basically like you've got a predisposition for it, but it's not necessarily like a major problem. But you know, again with zinc, right? So I've got these two which say that zinc may reduce blood glucose, which is great. And then I've got this one that says I've actually got mildly higher serum zinc. So with this one, if it was an AA, it means you got higher serum zinc. If it's a GG, it means you got lower serum zinc. And if it's an AG, it means you're like in the middle, basically. So it's not good and it's not bad, right? It's right in the middle. So zinc for me is a supplement that I definitely feel benefit. Like there's not, most minerals you take them and you don't feel a difference. Whereas zinc, I feel more androgenic, I feel more energized and things like that on zinc. The B1 stuff's all fine. So this was the interesting one here for choline. Okay, so reduced turnover of methathione to phosphatidylcholine, like that really does lend itself to somebody with issues with lipids and various other things as well. So supporting that process or supplementing with phosphatidylcholine, or as I'm doing at the moment, I'm just supplementing with a sunflower lecithin. But that's that's an interesting one for me and something that is definitely useful. Vitamin A, decreased beta carotene conversion to active form of vitamin A. This is really common. Like this is like very, very. A lot of people think that they can get enough vitamin A from plant sources, but the plant sources of vitamin A do not convert through to the active form of vitamin A in the majority of people. So, knowing this information, it means so I can't eat carrots for my vitamin A. It's not going to work, right? I need to make sure that I'm supporting with eating things like liver, for example, which are going to be high in vitamin A. Yeah, and also, if I have a reduced turnover of methathione to phosphatidylcholine, I should certainly be supporting my diet with more choline as well. So, choline is something that I've always been big on, egg yolks and those sorts of, liver, kidneys types of things for choline levels as well. So we can, we'll run through a few more sections of this. So here again, still talking for the MTHFR side of things, right? Selenium, fine, vitamin K, slightly lower levels of plasma, but nothing major. It's really the ones the double genotypes that are not in your favor that you need to focus on mainly. It doesn't mean it's going to present in life, but it is something to be aware of. So decreased grey matter in the old brain, not necessarily a good thing. So my short-term memory isn't great, so maybe I need a bit more magnesium. And so on and so forth. So here, a couple of things for slightly lower coenzyme Q10. Nothing major, but it does suggest that if I supplement with CoQ10, it will help my serum levels to raise. So that's good to know. and my energy levels are always pretty nice when I supplement with coenzyme Q10, so that's useful. This was an interesting one for me. So the carnitine side of things. So like I said, I probably first started taking carnitine about 15 or 16 years ago, something like that, and always felt like it was androgenic for me. I felt good with carnitine. And so this actually shows that potentially I've got higher serum carnitine levels, but when you actually do a little bit of it also says that it means it could be affecting levels within the cell. So I did a little bit of digging on this particular genotype, and it suggests that there is lower cellular carnitine and higher serum carnitine. So, for that particular example, it would be like, right, how can I support more serum carnitine? I think something like an acetyl L-carnitine, which crosses the blood, the blood-brain barrier, is probably going to be a good option there. Maybe a better option for me than support, for the neurological benefits. Maybe a better alternative than like an L-carnitine tartrate or something like that, which is very quickly absorbed, but doesn't necessarily travel across into cells as effectively. So, best practice maybe to do a gram of carnitine, like tartrate, and a gram of acetyl a day, or something along those lines for myself.
Have you ever looked into kangaroo meat?
Kangaroo meat? No, I have not looked into kangaroo meat. Is it very high in carnitine?
It's like 5 times or much higher in carnitine than beef. It's like extremely high in carnitine.
I'll have to get some of my Australian friends to ship me some meat over or something. Yeah,
there was a guy. yeah, exactly. There was a guy on X that made a point, or tried to make a hypothesis, that it was the carnitine in kangaroo meat and even stallion meat, because I think stallions also had like 2 or 3 times higher levels of carnitine than beef. This is why they are so muscular. So that was an interesting hypothesis. Yeah,
and I mean carnitine is an interesting. It's a very interesting thing to. I probably haven't researched carnitine in as many directions as I should have done, because it serves lots of purposes and it supports lots of things. So you obviously think of like its transport of fats and things like that, right? So like fatty acid transport and that sort of thing. Something that you consider it for. And for example, if you have lower cellular carnitine, then perhaps you're struggling to transport, fats as effectively. Could that also be contributing towards higher levels of lipids and things like that? For sure, right? Possibly, right? So these are things to think about. But yeah, I definitely would be interested to get some kangaroo meat. That's for sure.
yeah.
Some lactose stuff.
But before I continue, this is what I wanted to say. So, very interesting test. I don't know if you can source it there where you are. I need a prescription for it for some reason. This is retarded. But like a fatty acid profile. So you get like a blood draw, or it's not a fatty acid, it's a carnitine profile, my bad. And so they basically look at the free fatty acids with and without the carnitine combination, so to speak. It's a simplified version. And you can basically see where the defect comes in a combination of beta oxidation and also like fatty acid oxidation. So this is kind of like backing up to see how your diet is inadequate in a way, and like what you actually need with a carnitine. Do you need something with a carnitine, or you can take it alone? That's kind of like what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to take a look into that, because obviously with that information I've got around carnitine, it'd be it'd be really interesting to see what those different levels look like, and how that could affect things. Lactose, no lactase produced as an adult, so that's.
But how's your milk tolerance, by the way?
It's not great, to be honest, but I do. It's okay, but I do better with goat milk. Like I definitely do better with goat milk and things like that. But I typically don't consume a huge amount of dairy.
The thing is, like my hypothesis is that you can this is what research have shown, right? That you can get that enzyme back. It's kind of like an adaptation phase. So I'm going to use an analogy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right, when you start eating glucose, you get massive spikes in blood sugar,
Yeah.
and like over the
Yeah.
course of a week or two, that blood sugar will actually start to decrease because your body's starting to adapt to metabolize it better. It's not like
100%.
glucose
Yeah.
equals insulin and a blood sugar,
No,
so the body
no.
can adapt. So we
Yeah.
have fixed my wife's lactose intolerance. She's basically had it
Yeah.
for her whole life, and now she's
Yeah.
basically on a dairy dominant diet with like zero
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah, like I'm by no means lactose intolerant, right? So like when I say I don't consume a lot of dairy, like I don't consume milk daily, but sometimes I'll drink a liter of milk in a day and I'm absolutely fine, right? So it's not that I'm by no means lactose intolerant. It's just not something I consume on a daily basis. But over the course of a week, I probably consume like 2 to 3 liters of milk or something like that, right? Over an entire week, something along those lines.
Yeah, yeah. So the point is basically like when you look at genetics, it's like, hey man, you should not consume lactose. But then on the other flip side, it's like, but do you get any symptoms? And it's like, no,
Yeah.
you don't get
No.
any symptoms. And milk is like an amazing food to consume. So if you actually like milk, there's no
Yeah.
reason to actually avoid it.
No, exactly. And so, I'm not going to go on too much more on these ones because I want to just show a more general thing. But like here, we've got issues with histamine, which this is something I've spoken to you about a lot over the past year. And I definitely have some histamine issues going on, but it seems to be not from a reduction in the production of DAO. So DAO is the enzyme that breaks down histamine. So but having said that, okay, so another thing to note on these tests is if there is 2 lines here, it doesn't mean that you don't have the genotype for it, the gene for it. It means it wasn't tested, right? So these are gaps in the testing, okay? So just because this one says that I don't have a reduced production of DAO, like these other 3 could all be hitting, like, so
Yeah.
where there are gaps, this is an issue. Where there are gaps, there could be problems as well, right? So the Ancestry.com one was much more it covered much more things than the 23andMe one, as far as I could see when I quickly looked through both of them. But to go back through this and see how you can actually utilize it. So, for example, one of the things I've been that I've been working at most is sort of the lipids and that side of things. So then you can dive into to be more specific about things. So let me find heart health, wherever that is. You can do obviously mitochondrial and things like that. Here we go.
The most interesting thing for me would not be your cholesterol per se, but the LP little a, because a lot of people say that that's purely genetic. But I want to see like how yours is going to change. That's defying
exactly.
genetics. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like Hans said, I'll pull it up in a little minute. I can't find it right now. How to get there? Dashboard maybe. One second. Summary reports. Here we go. Yeah. You can tell this is built by software people because it's.
It's not user friendly.
I mean, it is, but it's like not for me. So like the lipid side of things. So yeah, like the other day, so I had my LPA measured the other day, and it was like really high. Not in the very top category, which I was happy about, but pretty like it was kind of on the edge there. So I'm really interested to see over the next couple of weeks and then retest. So my cholesterol's come down a huge. My LDL has come down. My HDL's gone up. Great, but the LPA is high still. So I'm going to retest that next week while supporting the reduction of LPA, which everyone says that LPA is genetic, right? And it's the most commonly thrown out thing. But it's like there's studies showing niacin reducing LPA by 30%. There's studies showing L-carnitine reducing LPA by like 15%, 20%, that kind of thing. And these are people that as LPA isn't that bad, right? Like, so to give you an idea, the top of the healthy reference range is like, I think it's like 95 nanomoles or something like that, or around that area. Mine was 195, so it's double that, right? So if you have a 10% improvement or a 20% improvement at 90, and and then I have the same 20% improvement at 200. That's a big difference. Like that's a huge difference, right? Like in terms of total. So I'm going to be supplementing with the things that I know that reduce or can reduce LPA. So that's going to be niacin, L-carnitine, and then see how we go on that. But so here, I've got some things for increased risk of coronary artery disease, and like I have had people die in my family die in their 40s from heart attacks, right? So these are things that I need to be considering and aware of. But like here's a prime example. So like I've got an increased risk of coronary artery disease, and then I've got this nice little green fella here, which is a decreased risk of it. So maybe those two things can help.
It's not showing the right screen. I think it bugged out again.
Okay, fine. Let me swap screens again. Sorry. It's because I changed the presentation screen. There we go. So here we go. So we've got this one here with an increased risk of coronary artery disease, and then we've got this one here, which is the decreased risk. So hopefully those two will be fighting against each other nicely. And then
it seems like your nitric oxide genes are looking good.
Yeah.
Good for you.
And let me find you can see the ferritin and the aspirin therapy and things like that. Yeah. Perfect. HDL. So like my HDL stuff is good, is good. So I've got higher HDL. I mean, I say it's good, right? We are led to believe that high HDL is really heart healthy, but we're also led to believe that high LDL is really heart unhealthy. And so just because it's telling you that high HDL is good, it doesn't necessarily mean high HDL is good. I'll let you do your own reading on that, guys. But like there's some information about HDL and it being not that well correlated to longevity necessarily, right? So it's just something to consider. Just, higher HDL, it actually has some, I think, from my readings on it, which have not been, huge, it doesn't actually show that much good correlation with longevity, HDL. So it's one of those things. It's the same. So I've got a client at the moment who is been on statins for 10 years. And they've never tested his LPA. And I was like, can I see your I just want to see your LPA, and he's like, yeah, I haven't got it. They've never sent it, and it's because statins increase LPA. So of course they don't want to. They're not going to they're not going to measure it. They're not going to show it to him, because the statins can increase LPA. Yes, they bring down LDL, but they increase LPA. So this is why the whole narrative is that LDL is the problem. Because if the narrative was LPA is the problem, then statins aren't sexy anymore, right? Even though when you look at if you look at the cholesterol and longevity data versus the LPA and longevity data, if you look at the LDL and longevity versus LPA and longevity, the LDL one is it's a U shape, right? And that, which means that at low levels it's high risk. At very high levels it's high risk. But in the middle, you're good. And that middle is high. It's high. It's not low. It's plenty. Whereas with the LPA, the LPA is definitely it's a less of a U shape, and it is definitely more of a straight up risk, right? So this is why they don't want to show you that information. So I've got this here for slightly elevated triglycerides. Mine have never been above reference range. They're they sometimes skim towards the top, but they've never been above reference. And then
lucky you did. My triglycerides has always been astronomically high for absolutely freaking no reason.
Yeah, it's interesting.
On a very low carb diet, they're 150, 170. This is just so high.
It's interesting, yeah. And then so once you run this data, you might see that you've got a little gene variation for that or something like that. Yeah, I mean, so I was diagnosed with familial hypercholesterolemia at 17 years old, right? I don't have it.
Yeah, interesting.
So okay, there's these two, right? For sure. Okay, so one of these ones could be it, but based on all of the other ones, I mean, even this one here, I've got one for a lower LDL, right? Obviously, I've got this one here, so I've got ApoB for a higher LDL. So those two can possibly, but like I was diagnosed with familial hypercholesterolemia. Like that's just it's what they give. This is the name they give to people that have got elevated cholesterol that shouldn't have, or that where it's elevated beyond what it should be. I like obviously because I was like a teenager, they straight away put me into that category. But maybe I just had a choline deficiency, right? Like, let's be honest.
I'm curious, bro. Like, how did they diagnose that? Was it literally from just a cholesterol test, or did they actually look at your genetics?
From a total cholesterol.
Yeah, see, that's retarded, right? That is not how you actually diagnose someone.
No, I know. It's not like it's a disease, right? Like, you when you diagnose a disease, you have to test for the disease. You can't test for the symptoms of the disease, right? So, if somebody has whatever disease it might be, which has 100 different possible side effects, you don't just pull one of those side effects and then go, hey, you've got that disease, right? Do you know what I mean? Like joint pain. If you have joint pain, you could have lots of different types. It could be any number of diseases. And it could also be that you just did squats yesterday, right? So, it's one of those things. And so, but the pathogenic for hypercholesterolemia, I have none of them, right? None of them. So why has my cholesterol always been high? That's a good question. And then, the nitric oxide side is normal. Statins, normal. And then any others here that are interesting. So again, here, it's the same methylate. It's the same one. So, lipoprotein A, very mild. Very mild. So not a major. So although I've got very high LPA, I don't have the genes for high LPA. So if high LPA is genetic, and my LPA is high, then why don't I have the genes for high LPA? Right? They'll tell you that the LPA is genetic, but they don't test your genes. I've tested my genes, and I do not have the gene. Well, I mean, I have a mild case, like a very mild case, right? So
no, that would make me even more. What's the right word for this? Not afraid, like cautious. But anyway, like, what was your hsCRP? Have you ever looked at your interleukin-16 and ESR as well?
Yeah, so I have. ESR has always been low, like it's always been good, and my hsCRP is always like 0.4. It's like it's always good. Yeah, I mean the highest it's ever been is like 0.5, I think, or something like that.
So the organic acid test that you did that look at your DNA damage or not?
No, it didn't look at DNA damage, no.
Okay. Yeah, and also like based on the organic acid test you did, your mitochondrial markers did not really indicate that you had severe oxidative stress going on. So it's interesting that your LPA is like elevated. Yeah,
exactly. But within all this, if you start to look at the issues or the areas to potentially, so I do have this one here, right? So this is another one for ApoB. Oh, sorry, this is for ApoB, not LPA, right? So this one could be the reason for the higher LDL, right? That could be the LDL one and the ApoB one, but it's not the LPA one, right? The LPA one is different. So, if you look at all of this as, and again, do not have familial hypercholesterolemia. Do not have these two, right? Don't have. So But if you look at some of the problem areas for the genetic information here, you've got potential low levels of phosphatidylcholine, right? Or certainly issues with the choline through to phosphatidylcholine. Right, there's that. Lower levels of methylation, yeah, potentially lower levels of cellular carnitine. So those sorts of things, right? If carnitine can reduce LPA by 10 to 20%, and I have low levels of cellular carnitine, then then there's some interesting ideas around that. And likewise with phosphatidylcholine as well. So I haven't done the digging on. I haven't done any reading on phosphatidylcholine for LPA yet, but we talked about this on one of the other podcasts where it was like they did the soy lecithin study on people with high cholesterol, and it reduced their cholesterol by like 40%. Just soy lecithin alone, right? So maybe it is I'm taking sunflower lecithin rather than soy lecithin because soy lecithin is very estrogenic, right? The soy lecithin is very estrogenic. Sunflower, I'm not a huge fan of its fatty acid composition necessarily, but it is not soy at least, right? So that's a pro. I have bought egg yolk lecithin, but it seems to be much lower in the in the total phospholipids than the sunflower one. I just don't think they've got such good extract. The extract products of it aren't as comprehensive. So if anyone out there makes supplements, then please go and make a really cool egg yolk lecithin that's like super high in phospholipid, because I will buy it. So supplementing with the phospholipids, phosphatidylcholine, definitely can support reduction in LDL, as proved in a study in people where they saw massive reductions in it. So it's really interesting. But with things like LPA and so on and so forth, and lots of the things that I see in my blood work, even something like high levels of arsenic could be responsible for that, right? So this is where you look at things like your detoxification processes, and you look at things like hair mineral analysis, and you can then see where issues might arise. So, for example, with high levels of certain heavy metals like arsenic, you have like chronic activation of AMPK, for example, and you have mitochondrial dysfunction. Like what can chronically elevated AMPK and mitochondrial dysfunction can lead to all sorts of changes within all sorts of things within lipids, right? Even things like having elevated having a difficulty breaking down histamine, that can compromise your lipid profile, right? It can if you have high levels of histamine, it can compromise lots of things. There's this really interesting relationship between histamine, prolactin, and cholesterol, for example, right? And so I've been experimenting with mecunopurines for lowering lipids. A totally random, offbeat study I read on rats, but it shows amazing benefits in rats for lowering lipids. So I'm interested in if that might affect LPA as well, or if not. But lots of mechanisms there, in terms of like supporting liver function and things like that, but also lowering prolactin too. And I often have elevated prolactin, and higher levels of prolactin can cause increases in lipids. Things like cabergoline, which is a dopamine agonist, which drastically lowers prolactin, also lowers lipids significantly. So there's lots of mechanisms at play that are really interesting, and how one of these things, or as big as small as it might be, could have implications much further down the chain. So from the SHBG side of things, which is something I've been experimenting with a lot lately, but if you have chronically elevated AMPK, it suppresses mTOR, and mTOR is really important as a signal for like growth, development, growth and adaptation, for example. Whereas chronically elevated AMPK is like I'm I'm struggling, I'm dying, I'm starving, right? And with this whole process, so this is a really interesting part of it, and this I think is probably linked in from the genetics and the hair mineral of having things like high levels of arsenic and low levels of methylation, or not good methylation, is impaired mitochondrial function, chronically elevated AMPK, which lowers mTOR, and then with lower levels of mTOR, you get reduced levels of leptin, and leptin, from my reading, seems to be the most important thing for SHBG. So I'm really like it's a whole thing that I'm super excited to go down. And I know that everybody links insulin. We went through this last time. I know everybody links insulin with SHBG, but insulin, like elevated insulin levels, increase mTOR. mTOR increases leptin, and so I think that there's an interesting mechanism down that route.
If you have that image, share it so we can look at the correlation between insulin versus the leptin for SSBG.
Yeah, for sure. Let me pull that up. I do have it. So it's a really interesting thing to look at, because here we go. So we got leptin and SH. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
So, if you look at those two graphs, and you say, and it didn't have any more information on it, which would you say was had a stronger pattern, right? Like, honestly, if you look at insulin and SHBG there, like they're all on the same line, apart from three dudes which are not, right? That honestly. Yeah. Whereas when you look at leptin, that's like you can draw a line through that. So it's one study. The study information is leptin and adiponectin. So again, we know that adiponectin and SHBG are very, very interlinked, and so again, this is a nice chart, right? That's nice. So this is the study on the leptin and SHBG and the insulin and SHBG. But from a mechanistic point of view, I know I'm moving off of genetics, but this is one of the things I'm super excited about, and it does feed into the genetic side of things. Is that leptin has lots of receptors, and some of those receptors are directly linked through to the SHBG pathway. So in particular, the P13K to AKT. So this is one of the major suppressors of SHBG, and so insulin signals through this, but leptin directly signals through this process as well. So where this says insulin, you can replace the word insulin for leptin, and it's the same thing, right? So, so essentially, low levels of leptin would reduce signaling here, which would stop the suppression of SHBG. And things that lower leptin, lower ATP, heavy metals, specifically arsenic, lower leptin, homocysteine lowers leptin, ammonia, high MCJ lowers leptin. So MCJ is something that's in the mitochondria, and it drastically reduces type 1 complex 1 mitochondrial function, and it also which that in itself will lower leptin, and one of the only way you can really impact MCJ is through methylation. So it needs to be, in order to reduce it, you need it needs to be methylated. So it's a really interesting thing. But yeah, so the genetics led me down this path of it being more of a leptin-related process because of the methylation side of things, because of the arsenic side of things, and and how all those interlink. So over the next few days, before I do the LPA tests, I am running just a few days of leptin maxing, and I'm going to see how I go. And so far, honestly, I'm I'm feeling pretty good. So I'm really excited. So I want like this is a good time for me to ask actually, Hans. If you were trying to leptin max, how would you do it? So like obviously the easiest ways of like being obese and things like that, right? Like overeating, being overweight, being unhealthy. But like if someone had chronically low leptin, like what are your thought process? Like do you have any ideas for that?
Dude, you're asking the person that has not researched this very much. I
Yeah.
can think of basically the basics
Okay.
where don't overeat, don't exercise, get lots of sunlight, optimize your sleep,
Yeah.
like the basics. That's it.
Yeah.
What's your
So
take on it?
so well, okay. So my take on it is like this is a question I should have asked you because this is your thing. Leptin is like down the leptin. I think here is what's like the actual the actual mechanism. Like it's not attaching to the receptor. Like that's the mechanism. But I think the cause here is high like chronic elevated AMPK. Like dude, I was smashing berberine for weeks trying to lower my cholesterol, and berberine like is it's the AMPK herb. That's what it does. That's how it functions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But so the question I should have asked. So the reason why insulin doesn't work for me, and I know that insulin does not lower my SHBG, is because I am not getting leptin from insulin, right? And the reason I'm not getting leptin from insulin is because my mTOR is suppressed because the AMPK is chronically elevated. So this is my theory. So the real question would be not how can I lower AMPK, but it's like how can I mTOR max, right? That would be more fun, yeah?
The thing is, like, I think you're one of those few unique individuals. I have had some of these clients before where they were eating a moderate to low carb diet. Their SSBG was high. And it's like, okay, let's just increase your carbohydrates because there's an inverse correlation between your carbohydrate intake and SSBG. Start eating more carbohydrates, SSBG goes up. This is exactly what's been happening to you.
Yeah.
And so basically, you talked about uric acid. So you have like ATP being broken down to AMP that activates the AMPK that also grows all the way down to uric acid. So I think for some reason, carbohydrates is just upregulating for some reason the breakdown of ATP for you into AMP that activates the AMPK. So technically, like Brian Johnson should be listening in here. Like if you want to go for longevity, you should be eating more carbohydrates.
Yeah, and so this is where there's two things to look at here, right? It's like, okay, the hack, right? There's a hack, and the hack is to increase mTOR. So in order to increase mTOR, I'm going to go with like HMB and phosphatidic acid, right? So phosphatidic acid and HMB, they're both supplements that increase mTOR, okay? So that's the hack, but it's not the solution, it's the hack. So I can supplement with them short term to increase mTOR and see if that helps with increasing leptin. And so I've ordered a leptin test, which I'm going to run on the same day as the blood work. So then I can. Unfortunately, it's going to take too long to get the leptin test to run two tests, and it's actually a pretty expensive test. So I'm not going to run two of them. I am only going to run one. But at least if I run one of those on the same day as an SHBG test, I can see like if my SHBG is miraculously down or lower. At least I can, or if it's high and leptin is high, then I can rule that out, right? I can rule it out. But at least if there is an inverse association there, it would be interesting, right?
Yeah. Could you just stop the screen share for a moment?
Sure.
All right. So here's what I'm thinking. mTOR is mostly stimulated by leucine. So if you're using HMB is actually created from leucine. So there's all of the studies from HMB is actually that shows anabolism comes from underfeeding studies. So these are people that's eating like 60 to 80 grams of protein, right? It's like HMG is anabolic. It's like, dude, if you just ate more protein. So if they actually had people eat like double body weight protein, there was no benefit to HMG. So when you talk about phosphoric acid, PA, I think that might be, if this works, the PA might be the one. Yeah, but that's doing most of the lifting, but that's also coming from the cell membranes. That could actually be coming from the phosphatidylcholine that you are not creating enough, going back to the methylation PNMT enzyme.
Exactly that. Yeah. So, and SHBG is also does support cell membranes and mitochondrial membranes. So if there are issues with membranes, so it could also just be phosphatidylcholine is low, and that could be causing elevation. It could be as simple as that, right? But what the idea behind this is that if what things do we know increase SHBG, right? That are not necessarily causing mitochondrial dysfunction. Sorry, what things? I said it right. What things do increase SHBG that do not necessarily damage mitochondrial function? And so we know that fasting can increase SHBG. We know that keto diets can increase SHBG. We know that those sorts of those are two of the most clear cut ones, and both of those do increase AMPK, which will suppress mTOR. So that's my interest in that as a mechanism. So the BHB ketone directly lowers AMPK as well. So we know that the ketogenic diet lowers. We know the ketogenic diet increases SHBG in most people, and we know that's also through ketones. And then it's just perhaps that could be the mechanism for it. Just because somebody goes on a keto diet, it doesn't mean that they have suddenly got damaged mitochondria causing issues with energy production, right? So, but damaged mitochondria with energy production issues will cause issues with AMPK too. So, I think anything that you can do to improve ATP production, whether that be coenzyme Q10, which again, there were some red flags for coenzyme Q10 for me. Anything that you can do to improve ATP production through Krebs cycle and also through the electron transport chain, I think is really interesting. Still, that was my gut instinct. I just didn't necessarily know why, especially when we got the information back around my organic acid test with the low levels of citric acid, for example, showing issues with the Krebs cycle. And lots of these things will cause issues with the Krebs cycle, and therefore you will have lower ATP production, higher AMPK. So I think it's an interesting mechanism, but all this stuff's really fun and exciting until you do the bloods and it doesn't do anything, right? So, that's it's not true. I'm having pretty good success with most of these things, but lots of these things, you're chipping away rather than seeing big differences. Apart from the lipids, where it's I saw very big difference very quickly. So
yeah, so the thing is, my question to you would have been, why is carbohydrates? Because you said when you do a high carb diet, your uric acid is higher, and this isn't high fructose, right? You're not eating boatloads of fructose, right?
No.
Right. So why is your uric acid higher in a high carb diet, or at least the AMPK? Because uric acid is coming from the AMPK. Yeah. Why is it higher in a high carb diet than a low carb diet? Why is the high carb diet signaling fasting state more than the low carb diet? That's an interesting question.
Exactly that. And so that's where the suggestion of some mitochondrial dysfunction comes into play. And also, it's also an interesting one in terms of things like, obviously on days where I'm eating higher carbohydrates, there is potentially more oxidative stress because I'm having periods of much higher blood glucose and things like that. And so those sorts of things could be impacting it. For example, if someone was mildly insulin resistant, which I am not, but there are times where I'm, I do have the odd moment where I've got some insulin, resistance issues where I'll have the occasional day where my blood glucose will not go below 110 for a whole day, right? Where it will just sit high all day. And so if something like that is happening, then that could be signaling for a stress response for AMPK to increase. And so, whereas on a lower carb day for me, my blood sugar levels will sometimes still be elevated, but they'll definitely sit lower than on other days. So I do think there's definite issues with the citric acid or the Krebs cycle. Because as you said, if if it was purely from like let's say I was fasting, right? If it was purely from fasting, for example, you wouldn't expect to see anything exciting in your organic acid test in terms of your Krebs cycle. You'd expect it to look pretty normal. And you especially wouldn't, or I mean, okay, like if everything's good, yeah, like if everything's fine, like no one's going to be perfect, but you wouldn't necessarily see anything unusual. And so, to see the citric acid really low after a high carbohydrate diet, there's interesting suggestions within that, I think. So yeah,
The two things that I thought that might be worth experimenting, and let me know if you've ever done this, is what if you use something that enhances the conversion of the adenosine monophosphate back into ATP?
yeah,
And the two ones that's really good for that is creatine. So creatine megadosing, not 5 grams, like 15, 20 grams, something huge. And inosine. So inosine, so you when ATP gets broken down, it goes to inosine monophosphate. So actually when you supplement inosine, right, it can actually help to recycle that because it feeds back into the ATP cycle. So using either one alone or in combination might be very interesting to increase ATP levels.
Yeah, so I do have inosine, and I was taking it for a little while, and I stopped. I can't remember why I stopped, but I think it would be an interesting thing to test. So with inosine, it does increase uric acid, doesn't it? Because and so I think I stopped it because my uric acid levels were elevated.
How much though?
Like 10%, 15% above reference range.
Yeah, it's small. It's small.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's interesting that if inosine, if inosine is being heavily used, so, if inosine is being heavily used in that process, you'd expect high uric acid, and I've got higher uric acid, so potentially inosine is being, it is being used. I'm just not, it's just not. I'm not supplementing with it, right? Like, these various compounds, and likewise with creatine. So, one of the interesting things with creatine is that supplementing with creatine, it takes a strain off of your methylation process, and because you don't have to create as much much creatine. So, if someone does have poor methylation, then supplementing with creatine can be really useful because it means it takes a strain off producing so much of it. And if it is inosine and creatine that are, helping to, get that AMP back through to ATP in that process, then, I think supplementing with those would be sensible as part of that process. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is and I think this ties back into what you feel and what you don't feel. Like sometimes you're using creatine and you don't necessarily feel anything, but when you actually look at labs, and I've seen this many times for myself before, it's like you don't necessarily feel your cholesterol changing, you don't feel your HGCRP changing per se, but your labs is going to change, and then over time you're going to feel that. So even if you don't per se feel creatine, it might be changing that ratio, might be changing your SSBG. But back to creatine. Have you actually tested megadose and then tested your SSBG? Because I think we talked about that not too long ago.
Yeah, so I've done high dose creatine before and still had high. I mean, when I say high dose, I was supplementing maybe 10 grams per day, which isn't high dose, but it's I think it's enough to see. And my SHBG was still elevated. So I think that's why I haven't gone down that route as much, because I've ran plenty of blood tests where I've been supplementing with creatine as well, right? So,
yeah.
Well, but I think there's some interesting mechanisms for that to go through. But I'm super excited for the cholesterol side of things, and I'm excited to retest the SHBG as well. So, yeah.
You did mention about the coenzyme Q10, I think briefly. About the genetics, right? Have you bought a regular coenzyme Q10, or have you gone for the MitoQ?
I've literally just got the MitoQ, right? So
nice.
I'm excited to start that. So I think it's sensible for me to start that as part of this whole process, because it's all really tightly linked. So I feel that it's all to do with the the mitochondrial function and the ATP to AMP ratio. I still like that was my first test, and ATP maxing. I tried that in the first test, and it did have some positive results on SHBG, and it had considerable positive results on free testosterone. It did a really good job of that, but I wasn't like. My SHBG was like still top end of reference range, so it did some good work, but it wasn't like, it didn't get me that excited. So, and it's an interesting thing, is like how quickly do you think you would see, how quickly can you see changes in SHBG? Like, that's something I have no idea. I don't know how long you have to do something before you see a real positive outcome on it. But I can only go on based how I feel, right? And when I was ATP maxing, like, I didn't have increases in libido or strength, or I didn't feel anything, right? So I think that's I didn't feel different, and I do think that you can, there are certain things you start to take them and you go, yeah, I feel different. Like, my energy's better, my libido's higher, like, these things are improving, and so I definitely think that there's certain things to look at for that. One of the supplements that I was using last week, so I actually did run some blood tests last week, because I was quite interested in the kind of I was really interested in the bile acid side of things and supporting liver function as part of this as well. So obviously, SHBG is produced in the liver, and there is some interesting stuff around bile acids and SHBG as well. And so I was and obviously the cholesterol side of things is fundamentally a liver issue as well. And so a really interesting supplement, which I was taking, which I'm excited to continue to take actually, is the L-orthanine L-aspartate, right? So this is LOLA supplement, and this is, it like drastically lowers liver ammonia levels. And so when ammonia levels are high, you have mitochondrial dysfunction, you have elevated AMPK, and you have lower levels of leptin as well, right? So it was part of my early thought process around that, and I actually did a high dose of that for 3 or 4 days and felt pretty good, and then ran blood. So I'll get results on those in the next few days. So that's gonna be quite an interesting one to see how that might have affected things, because when you look at things that can, there's so many things that can affect mitochondrial function, but heavy metals, stress, like low nutrient intake, fasting, etc. But also things like high levels of ammonia or acidosis, like these types of things can be really interesting as well for it. So having ammonia tests I tried to see if you can book ammonia tests, and it doesn't seem like it's an easy thing to get or to be able to test. So there's no real way of knowing that. But from a liver side of things, I think that if someone has elevated liver markers, then the L-orthanine L-aspartate looks like a really interesting compound to support liver health, basically, like really interesting.
Have you tested your BUN yet?
I've had BUNs. I've had before on tests before, and it's been like normal, within range. On the last blood tests I did, my bilirubin was high, not crazy high, but it was elevated above reference range. And obviously bilirubin and BUN and these sorts of things are all quite well interlinked as well, aren't they? So
yeah, I think that's an indirect marker of the ammonia. So if you can't test the ammonia, then BUN might be a good marker to look at.
I'll have a look for a BUN test. Yeah,
I think I can't test it for some reason. Like, I didn't offer it. How freaking weird is that? But I'm jelly, man. Like, I'm still waiting for my MitoQ. It should have arrived this week. But I think due to the wars going on, there were some delays because it's linked to Dubai and then coming to us, and obviously with the airport issues. So I'm, man, pisses me off. I want my MitoQ.
I know. So talk me through your thought process around MitoQ for you? I think we spoke about it briefly last time with your organic acid test, like pre and post exercise. Yeah, is your thought process for that?
Yeah, so the main reason is like there was a lot of markers that indicated I have an issue with the recycling of NADH back into NAD. And so when those markers are elevated, it usually indicates that the mitochondria, the complex 1, is not functioning the way it should. So now the body is utilizing other mechanisms or other enzymes that can do the same job, but it's just much less effective. And so it needs to recycle it, it's just less effective. And so the reason I chose MitoQ instead of coenzyme Q10 of ubiquinol is because usual coenzyme Q10, which is the ubiquinone or ubiquinol, is that they are just fat soluble. And so they accumulate in any fatty tissue in the body, which is the cell membranes, the mitochondria as well. But the MitoQ is a modified version. So usual ubiquinone has a long tail, fatty tail. The MitoQ is a much shorter tail that allows it to enter the mitochondria where it's used in the electron transport chain coenzyme or the complex 1, my bad, where I need it. So that is why I've used that. And so you might have heard about the peptide called SS31. And so SS31 is kind of like a peptide that stabilizes the cardiolipin, the fatty acids around the complexes that allows them to be stabilized to create energy better. Now, those fatty acids, cardiolipin, become oxidized with oxidative stress. The reason you have oxidative stress in the mitochondria is because very often you have low levels of coenzyme Q10. So it kind of like solves like a double problem to help to recycle NADH when in axis actually creates oxidative stress. So it recycles the NADH back into NAD, helps to preserve the cardiolipin. So it just like enhances every aspect of the mitochondria. And I think that's exactly what I need because like based on my organic acid tests, those were kind of like the main thing. The only thing that stood out was like impaired conversion of NADH back into NAD.
It's interesting, yeah. And within the complexes, is complex 1, do you think that's what's primarily responsible for that, or do you think it could be one of the other complexes as well?
If it was complex 2, my succinic acid would have been elevated. It's not. So I do think it's the complex 1 aspect. But we will see because like you have a coenzyme Q10 pool, not just, right? And it's been shared around all of the complexes. So I guess we'll see what happens. Like the thing is that
it's going to support all. It's going to support all of them, isn't it? Essentially, because it's just it's part of that really important part of the electron transport chain, isn't it? So
yeah, exactly. So when you do a test, you basically create a hypothesis, and then you test the hypothesis, and then you have to test again to see if like you were correct or not. So this is what makes it exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so for my tests coming up now, I've got too much. I'm too excited. I've got too many things I want to test, right? But the main things are I am going to go direct for mTOR. I'm going direct mTOR leptin, right? I'm going direct mTOR leptin for SHBG. That graph was just too good for me, right? I'm just like too excited by that graph, right? I know it's one graph in one study, but it got me excited. And so I've got that one I want to do, and then I've obviously the LPA, and then with the cholesterol, I'm going to continue. Well, before I do those, for the next few days, I'm going to be hitting high dose McCuna-pruriens for LDL reduction. I am still going to be supporting bile flow for that as well. So when I say supporting bile flow, it's really I'm not overcomplicating this in any way, shape, or form, right? So for bile flow, my stack is simple. It's taurine, lecithin, bicarbonate soda, and some bitters. And so what I'm using is I'm just using arugula, right? That's my. I'm not doing herbs. I'm not doing anything like that for bile flow. I'm just going real nice and simple. So I've got taurine, the phospholipids or the lecithin, bicarbonate soda. Bicarbonate soda is an interesting one, right? So, there's lots of talk. You see it on like Instagram and stuff like that all the time about people using bicarbonate soda for various things. But bicarbonate is really important for bile production and bile flow, and so if people have issues with things like frequent loose stools, for example, they can quite quickly deplete their bicarbonate levels. and so supporting the body's production of bicarbonate by supplementing with some bicarbonate. And I'm not doing like tablespoons and tablespoons of bicarbonate. I'm doing like 2 teaspoons of bicarbonate a day, which I've not researched the dosage so much, but I don't think it's not huge. I don't feel it's a huge dose, and I have no gastric issues with it whatsoever, right? So I know that if I took a tablespoon of bicarb, that I'm probably going to be in trouble. But I mean, like back in the day, like when I was a kid, I was an endurance cyclist, and this was we used to slam bicarbonate soda right back then, for as a lactic acid buffer, right? I don't think there's any real. I mean, there's some sense to it, but so I'm okay taking bicarbonate soda, and so yeah, I'm doing like 2 to 3 grams of taurine with the lecithin and a half a teaspoon of bicarb twice a day. So that's for bile flow with the arugula.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Like,
Yeah.
dude, bicarbonate, man. The first time I tried it, it was probably one of the most nasty supplements I ever did. And it was like, okay, I'm going to get a cup of water. Biggest mistake ever. Dissolve my bicarb in the water, start drinking it. It was so disgusting. It was massive disgusting. And if you drink too much, you're going to get the shits. Of course.
Really quickly, yeah. Really quickly.
So I guess like when you're cycling, you're just like pulling your pants down and like putting your ass over the bike and just like letting go while you're driving. It's like, okay.
Just go, man. Just go, yeah. Just go. But yeah, I mean, if anyone, like from the bile side of things, like I still think bile is like, I'm super excited for that side of things, and I think it's really interesting. I should actually say one other thing that I have been supplementing with is the acacia fiber, and whilst like that's just for me now, that's just a long-term thing, right? That's not anything specific, but one of the things it does do is it will bind to more of the secondary biles for excretion, for example. Like it's gonna catch, like, higher fiber intake does lower cholesterol levels, not cholesterol production, but cholesterol excretion, because you get less reabsorption of bile, basically. If you are supplementing, or if you're consuming higher fiber, you get less reabsorption of bile. And so I've supplemented with it before and seen like some small moderate improvements in lipids, but never anything drastic. So I'm just going to continue with that. Like, and I'm doing like 10 to 20 grams of that a day, so not a huge dose either. So
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, I've even used some of the base supposed bile binders, like beans, and never actually noticed like a difference in my cholesterol level. But in terms of my current experiments, I'm using the D-chiro-inositol, which I'm going to taste on Tuesday. So I should have the results. It's almost done. Then I'm going to start mangosteen. So mangosteen is also a aromatase inhibitor, but it's also a powerful antioxidant. So that would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah.
I am currently using Kestos, but also it's like more like a long-term thing. I've used it before.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's like a really good prebiotic. For you, it was like totally disastrous. But for me...
For me, it just took me... it took me a week or so to be able to tolerate even a teaspoon of it. Like, it was... But at the time, I had pretty bad digestive health at the time, right? So I imagine if I had tried to add 20 grams of acacia fiber at that point, I would have been in all sorts of trouble, right? I couldn't have done it. Whereas I think with these sorts of fibers for supporting, gut health and the microbiome, I think slow and steady is better than mega dosing for these types of things. I think you're much better off just starting off with like a teaspoon or less and working your way up from there, because otherwise you're just going to get crazy. You're going to get crazy bloating, and then that bloating, you're going to get higher inflammation markers, higher prolactin, higher estrogen. I don't think it's worth it, right? So, like, if I do real high fiber, my prolactin's elevated the next day, right? Because it's just from from inflammation in the digestion. Just whichever TNFA or whatever, whichever inflammation marker it is just signaling for higher prolactin. We talked about prolactin a little bit last time. It was interesting. So I had a guy, one of the guys I'm coaching at the moment. He actually had one of the tumors, or the cysts on the pituitary gland, and his prolactin was 90,000. So when mine's like 400 and I'm complaining,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like, it puts it in perspective, and so he's on a really high dose of cabergoline, and his prolactin was still 800. Like, it's still 800, right? So I think it's just for people being aware that with it, like we talked about this before about prolactin, like how much does it affect libido in a negative way? Like 90,000, right? That's a big difference.
I would say in his case, I would use a dopaminergic. I would use an anti-serotonergic like cyproheptadine or methagoline. That'd be good. Mm-hmm. And then a anti-estrogen. They've always shown that when you combine like a dopaminergic, like cabergoline, with exemestane or some kind of aromatase inhibitor, it actually shrinks the tumor and eventually gets rid of it. But
I mean, just quickly on that, because that is so important. So he won't mind me saying this because we've talked about it, and he was open for me to talk about this because he's aware of how much of a problem this was, and he wanted people to understand it. But his blood work's being managed by the NHS in the UK, right? And so they put him on TRT because he was hypogonadal but they didn't wait, right? They did that at the same time, okay?
Yeah.
So rather than wait to see if his testosterone improved after the cabergoline, like after the reduction in prolactin, they just put him on. They just treated the two things individually, like independently, right? Rather than treating them simultaneously, and they have him on a testosterone injection. I can't remember the particular type, but it's one that you get once every 10 weeks.
Yeah, like the Cohenade one. Yeah, it's not good enough.
I was like, man, and he was like, this is my testosterone. I was like, when was that in the 10 weeks? Like, was it on day 1 or was it on day 150? And also I was like, so what's your estrogen levels? He's like, yeah, they haven't tested that.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I know this is the NHS, so it's technically like, I say it's free, like it's taxpayer money, but I was like, you should sue them, man. Like, that's so bad. Like, okay, so right, he's got elevated prolactin. He's got elevated prolactin. They didn't check his thyroid. They didn't check his estrogen.
Yeah.
I was like, what's your thyroid like? And he's like, they didn't test it. Yeah. We like, fixing your thyroid can help with prolactin like enormously.
Yeah.
Like, hypothyroidism can cause major issues. Like, hypothyroidism can cause major issues for prolactin levels. So I just was like, it's one of those things where I was like, right, just book this test. It's like $100, and it will tell you all of that information. And then also, don't get your testosterone injection once every 10 weeks. Like, do it twice a week minimum. Because if you have got if you've got elevated, like if you've got elevated estrogen from high dose of testosterone, then you don't want I know that that this particular type of testosterone is a slow release type. Like, it's not like it's you get a big hit on day 1, but it's way higher on day 1 than it is on day at the end of 10 weeks. Like, there's a big difference there, a big difference. So it's not a sensible way of managing testosterone replacement therapy, in my opinion.
Exactly. Even if you use that one with a long half-life, you want to be injecting at least once a week, not once a month. At least once a week. And even then, your testosterone is not going to be as high because the amount of testosterone in testosterone under Cohenate is much lower. I've experimented between shorter half-life stuff like cypionate, enanthate, caproate, what's the other one? Under Cohenate.
Yeah.
The undercohenate every time gives me the lowest amount of testosterone because you need to use so much more of it. And you
Yeah,
like
yeah, for
yes, you
sure.
can inject less frequently, like once a week, but you need to use
Yeah.
so much more of it to get an adequate amount. And then your estrogen is going to be much higher as well.
Yeah. To be fair, he at three. I think the blood work he showed me was at 3 weeks post injection or 4 weeks post injection, and his testosterone was around 900. So that's actually pretty good.
Okay.
But his symptoms were awful. Like his symptoms were like he had zero. Like
Yeah.
he felt like he had zero testosterone still. And so I was like, first, it's like, okay, so how much, what's your what's your level of aromatase? Like how much estrogen have you got? And so we need, we're getting those bloods done. But I just thought, because we talked about prolactin last time, I just thought it's an interesting one to go into that and say, like, if you are going to go down the TRT route, which for some people, I actually think in his particular case, they should have at least waited to see if lowering prolactin helped, right? I do feel like that would have been a more sensible approach to it. But what do I know? And and I'm not a doctor, but and you should be measuring like you got to measure your estrogen, man. If you're taking testosterone, you have to measure estrogen.
Dude, what can I say, dude? We are just armchair internet warriors.
I know, yeah, we are.
That was a joke. No, I think
Yeah.
we're doing a lot of pioneer work. That what we are doing is like no one else is doing this. Very, 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 very few people are doing this. But all right, so to wrap this episode up, with all of the genetic tests that you've done, with a lot of analysis, cross-referencing,
Yeah.
what is your takeaway that you are currently like doing and taking action on?
So my number one takeaway is like go like spend $50 and get this done. Like that's my number one takeaway, because I just think it's so useful to know what's going on and what potentially could be your limitations here. Because without that information, you could be you could be throwing money down the drain with blood work and supplementation. I think, right? Not entirely, but I do think it reveals quite a lot. But my main takeaway, the things I've got to focus on, are my B vitamin intake, my choline intake, and potentially lecithin, like however I want to get my choline in, phospholipids in. I might go direct to phosphatidylcholine again. To be honest, I think that might be sensible to do that rather than going lecithin. But the trouble again with phosphatidylcholine is it's often soy based again, so it's often more highly estrogenic. But the sunflower one you can do. But my key takeaways are to focus on the methylation side of things, to dive a little deeper into the carnitine side of things, and then also to retest my cholesterol now that I know, now that I feel I don't have a disease. So it's like now if I don't have a disease, then maybe it could be high. And then also I'm gonna detox my arsenic. So that's in my game plan too. So for detoxing arsenic, this is an interesting one for that. So I've got it here, which is it's the cholera binder. So it's the algae. So it's a really interesting binder that it's a good binder to potentially use daily, and that's really can be useful for heavy metals. But the main thing for the detoxification or the loss of arsenic, I think, is going to be increasing methylation. So I'm going SAMe, and I'm going to go pretty high on the SAMe. I think, like, go relatively high on that a bit, and some TMG, and the B vitamins, particularly folate.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Like in terms of SAMe, what's your dose?
I was going to go like 1,000 milligrams a day or something.
Okay.
So the supplement I've got is 600 milligrams, I think.
Okay. Yeah, and you're pretty much aware of like the symptoms of overmethylation, so you will know like when you're using too much and going back and those kind of stuff.
Oh, 100%. So I know that feeling well. I like did a mega dose TMG thing for a few days, and I felt awful. I felt so ill. Yeah. So I think over methylation things like anxiety, and those sorts of things would be the most. If I mean, like when you've seen people with issues with high methylation or over methylation, Hans, what would you say would be the key things to look out for?
Yeah, exactly. Like overmethylation is usually like you're breaking down your neurotransmitters too fast. So you might not have a lot of like the histamine issue. So histamine helps with motivation and drive. So you might have less of that, including dopamine and serotonin. So there might be like dopamine helps you to focus. So now you have kind of like this ADHD-like effect from the overmethylation, and then you have enhanced conversion of norepinephrine into epinephrine. So you have like more anxiety and irritability. So that's usually what happens when you overmethylate. The undermethylation is like also you have too much histamine, dopamine, and those kind of stuff, and so now you're like excessively focused, OCD on things. Those would kind of be some of the main ones that I can think of right now.
I mean, I think I'm tipping on that side of things for the last couple of days on the Sammy, to be honest. But so the other one of the other things as well is within my I didn't go into this because I wasn't as interested in it, but I think I got slow COMT, right? So that's a breakdown of neurotransmitters and things like that, isn't it? So like a reduced breakdown of them. So then you have to be even more careful with being overmethylated, because if you've got undermethylated would be because you've got a reduced breakdown of it. So then if you have too much of if too much of them are being created and you're not breaking them down effectively, then you could definitely be getting things like the high histamine symptoms or the high serotonin symptoms and those sorts of things.
Yeah. All right, so you're pretty much well dialed in. All right, so next week I think you will have a pretty good update on that stack.
Yeah, I think I'll have some really interesting things for next week, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, like how long did your DNA test results take to come in, though?
So my results actually took a few weeks. They took like 2 to 3 weeks minimum or something like that, I think. And then actually they took about 10 days to be exported from the app, like from once I already had them. Whereas so I ran my girlfriend's DNA tests as well, because she had the Ancestry.com, and the Ancestry.com ones arrived in her email 2 minutes after she downloaded them. So she had to wait a couple of weeks to get the initial results, but then she didn't have to wait again to then run the genetics. Yeah. So, and I think the Ancestry one is really quite nice and comprehensive. It definitely it has more of the kind of traits side of things and more around more around like what the actual thing can actually mean and the actual outcome of it can be around things like mental health and stuff like that. It was interesting. Yeah.
From what I've seen, when I compare mine, so like I think the company that I'm using is from Italy, so it's not a very well-known company, but I think the reports and whatnot, it's going to be like extremely good from what they have told me, like very reputable, but not as well-known on the internet. But when I compare what other companies, how long it takes to get your results from a whole genome test, it can take between 3 and 4 months. It's like, dude, what are you doing?
To be honest, like I say, mine was weeks, but I got it done ages ago. It could have easily been months to get my results. Like I don't remember exactly, but I know it took a long time because I was like, you know when you get the results and you forgot that you even took the test. It was that long, right?
Yeah. All right.
You've moved on with your life. You don't even care anymore.
Yeah, like that. I was 18 back here. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's like I don't care about that. Like I wasn't even into fitness anymore. Like I was like.
Oh my gosh. All right.
And just quickly, because I want to know about. So I want to the D-chiroinositol. How have you been finding it? And when did you get results from that? And what have you got next?
D-chiroinositol. I wouldn't say I feel anything. Like,
no.
Honestly, the stuff that I feel is freaking white button mushroom. When it comes to like lowering inflammation, just feeling good and getting good ghost vibes, freaking white button mushroom. But I would have a steak with a mushroom sauce on top every day of my life. Like, dude, that stuff is freaking amazing.
Yeah. I've been making a really good steak and white button mushroom sauce with some double cream. So just some double cream, mushrooms, garlic, and onions whizzed up with the double cream and the steak, and that is like That's as good as it gets.
Dude, excellent.
Yeah,
You're making my mouth water, bro. Man.
yeah.
But the thing is, like, I
Um,
can't having white button mushroom while I'm doing all of these experiments. So
no, no, for sure.
I'm craving.
So then you get the results on that soon. So that I'm excited for that though, because I think potentially it could be a nice aromatase inhibitor, but it would be just interesting to see if it affects anything else positively or negatively as well.
Yeah, hopefully, I'm really looking forward to my liver panel. Like I've been using some antimicrobials here and there, and every time I use antimicrobials, my hsCRP and liver enzymes just keep on climbing up. So I really hope like that is going to have a good effect on that. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's just a case of like die off and just inflammation from and detoxification of that? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So when I've done a antimicrobial protocol and I've used binders like lactoferrin and Terrace gel and so on, even white button mushroom, like my inflammation has been really low. Like it binds it, it gets
yeah,
rid of it. Like I don't absorb it at all. But when I don't use a binder with it, inflammation just keeps on going up. Now I have
yeah,
actually been using Comfosol, and we talked about that in a previous episode,
yeah.
where I actually don't experience like die off sometimes typical die off symptoms
Yeah.
from it. So that's quite
Yeah.
interesting. So I'm going to be doing a stool test in, I think, less than 2 weeks. I think less than 2 weeks,
Yeah.
but then I have to wait another 3 weeks to get it. So we will talk about that. But then I've
Yeah.
also actually used, and like it feels like I'm using so many stuff. But here's the caveat: Decaroinositol is for aromatase. Kestose is for gut. It does not affect my estrogen in the same level. The other one that I'm using at the moment is Clostridium butyricum. So it's a probiotic that helps to increase your butyrate levels. It's not going to affect estrogen in the same way. It just helps to lower the inflammation in the gut and also helps to seal the gut lining when you're using an antimicrobial. And then I'm using the Comfosol. So
Yeah.
the experiments that I'm using or doing at the same time is not overlapping.
No.
So when I still get the decaroinositol results, it's going to be like the aromatase inhibition is coming from the decaroinositol.
Yeah. I mean, I think I can potentially run the cholesterol and the mTOR thing at the same time. I don't see any real major issues and crossover with those two particularly.
Yeah, but the thing is, like,
I might just blast those at the same time.
yeah, like I have used Gestus before, so I know how it affects my blood work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
most of the things I've used before, so I know like what it actually looks like. So when you use something new, like then like this compound that's doing what it's doing.
Yeah. I'm excited to see that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I think this is good. Let's wrap it up. Thank you guys for
Yeah.
watching. We'll check you in the
Thank
next
you
one.
guys.
Cheers.